Thank you, God, again for, among other things, this chapter, Jeremiah 50, that we want to title Her Cry, for a quote that comes out of the very last verse of this chapter that starts out in the first three verses with a prophecy against Babylon that will carry forward into chapter 51 as well. However, verses 1 through 3 here start out with proclaim, meaning make it public, beginning the chapter in much the way it will end with her cry as we work our way there. It's going to say, proclaim to the nations, Babylon is taken. Shame is what is going to overtake it in much the way we saw shame become the defining characteristic or one of the defining characteristics of his judgment against Moab. Saying, conceal it not. Her idols are going to be brought down and her images are going to be brought once again to shame. Babylon will be shaken with a judgment from the north, bringing to mind the way in which they were formerly the judgment from the north for other nations. It's coming full circle for Babylon in that consistent pattern that we have talked about that God will use with the nations. He has one standard for all people. It's righteousness and justice. And to the degree he uses a nation to punish a nation for falling beneath the standards of maintaining righteousness and justice, to the degree the nation he uses to discipline a wayward nation falls into the same patterns, it comes full circle for them, which is what is happening to Babylon. As in verses 4 through 5, it is going to say the people of God are going to return from their years of discipline with weeping, seeking an everlasting covenant in comparison to the covenant which they broke. Going forward in verses 6 and 7 to say that they were misled by their shepherds and leaders. However, God is bringing them into a season of redemption, noting that in their low point, they were exploited by those they might have once looked up to. However, those enemies or those who turned to become their enemies used their sins as an excuse to pretty much treat Israel in any way they wanted, forgetting once again that God had one single standard. And the fact that Israel was brought into a period of discipline did not write a blank check for those, once again, that God was using to discipline them. Using Babylon now as an example of a nation that went too far in their years of authority over Israel. Verses 8 through 10, going on to extend a call to those who might be in Babylon to flee, because Babylon is about to be thrown down by an array of nations. Verses 11 through 16 going on to say that God's judgment will turn the pride of Babylon into, once again, shame, and reminding us that it is not simply going to be a single nation arrayed against Babylon. In much the same way that Nebuchadnezzar arrayed nations against Israel, God is now arraying nations against Babylon, saying, as she has done to others, let it be done to her, pointing forward, as Isaiah did, to the judgment against Babylon in Revelation 18. This time, or in the Revelation, not the literal Babylon, because by this time it will be no more, but there is a metaphorical or spiritual Babylon that God will use to describe final judgment as well in the Revelation. Back here in Jeremiah, though, verses 17 through 20 of chapter 50, we'll talk about the way that Israel was hunted by Assyria before Babylon, and much like God dealt with Assyria before Babylon, he is now going to deal with Babylon, bringing justice to those who once brought justice to Israel. Israel, however, he is going to describe as being restored. In those days, there will be no iniquity found in them or any sin found in them, that being either Israel or Judah, as he has already mentioned them as once again a reunited two or reunited halves of the entire nation or the divided kingdom, talking about the days of their pardon. Going on in verses 21 through 32 to say that Babylon, however, will be a horror among the nations. Their judgment will come from every corner, and he is setting a snare for them that they were unaware of or that they did not know about. Once again, saying that their judgment and their captivity will come from every corner. He is describing it as his vengeance. Once again, repaying her according to her deeds, doing to her as she has done to others. Reminiscent again of almost the exact same language he will use for final judgment in Revelation 18, saying it is because she proudly defied the Lord, Part of her consequence is going to be the destruction of her young men and the total destruction of her soldiers, saying, I personally, God saying, I am against you because your day has come. Reminding us of the way we have talked about life can seem hard enough when it seems that life has turned against us. But we are in a world of hurt when God himself is the one who has turned against us in much the same way he's describing, having turned against his people before this, and now Babylon in chapter 50. Verses 33 through 38, however, talking about the way that his destruction of Babylon will bring peace to those who they oppressed, saying that a sword has been designated for Babylon, her officials and dignitaries, in my paraphrase, her wise men, her soldiers, and her idols. Talking about in verses 39 through 43, the way, once again, the nations have been arrayed against them, a cruel power approaching with no mercy, reminiscent of the way Babylon was described as an invader with no mercy against God's people in, again, the day of their judgment. God is bringing it full circle against Babylon. The role they once filled as disciplinarian, they are now going to experience as those being disciplined. The final section of the chapter, verses 44 through 46, saying that in Babylon's place or over Babylon, he will set whoever he pleases, saying that all the earth will tremble at Babylon's fall, and her cry shall be heard among the nations. Thus the title. Verses 33 and 34, reminding me that there are times when God relieves the oppressed using seasons that bring about the cries of those who refuse to release them from their oppression.